Welcome to today's lesson on multiplying decimals by decimals. Today we're going to use the area model to multiply two decimals together. Let's go ahead and get started. We are going to begin today by reviewing this 100ths block that we have on the screen. Now this one whole block is going to represent one whole. And that means that each square that you see on this block will represent 1/100th. Because there are 100 blocks in one whole, so one of them will represent 1 out of 100. Now each column is going to represent 1/10, because we have 10 columns in all, so one column will represent 1/10. You could even add a 0 on the end of 1/10 to make it 10 hundredths, and as you can see, that's 10 hundredths blocks that have all been shaded in. Now this is going to be a good visual to help us when we're trying to multiply decimals together, because each of these different squares represents a certain value of a decimal. Let's go ahead and begin. Now as we go through multiplying decimals by decimals, it's important to remember that multiplication is repeated addition. So we're going to be repeatedly adding a decimal by a decimal. Let's start with a decimal by a whole number first. If I wanted to multiply 1/10 times 3 wholes, I would be repeatedly adding 1/10 3 whole times. Let's see how that would look on our 100ths block. I would add 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10. So I repeatedly added 1/10 3 whole times, and that gave me 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. Now I just barely multiplied 1/10 3 whole times, so I multiplied a decimal by a whole number. But if I were to multiply a decimal by a decimal, I wouldn't have added 1/10 3 whole times. I would need to add part of 1/10 3 times. So let's go through an example together, multiplying a decimal by a decimal. We're going to start with 3/10 because we already have 3/10 on our hundredths block over here, and we're going to multiply it by 2/10. So we're going to find 2/10 of 3/10. Now we're going to start by shading in 2/10 on our hundredths block, but instead of using columns, we're now going to shade in 2 rows so it overlaps our 3/10. So I've now shaded in 2/10 of our columns. Now 3/10 was listed in blue. If I were to just look at 1/10 right here, 2/10 of it is shaded in pink. So I'm going to be repeatedly adding 2/10. So I have 2/10 plus 2/10 plus 2/10. But remember, we're only finding 2/10 of 3/10, not of one whole. So now when we try to find out what 2/10 of 3/10 is, we have double shaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hundredths. Now remember, each one of these squares is equal to 1/100th because there's 100 squares in all. So 3/10 times 2/10 equals 6 hundredths. And notice I put my 6 in the hundredths place, not the tenths place, because we're not working with tenths. Each box is representing 1/100th. Now that we've used our hundredths block to use an area model to show 3/10 times 2/10, let's look at the equation itself. It looks like you could multiply 3 times 2 because that will equal 6. But then how do you know where the decimal goes? Well, you can count how many decimals places your 2 and your 3 are away. So the 2 is 1 place value away from the decimal, and the 3 is also 1 place value away from the decimal. So together, that means that our 6 is going to be 2 place values away from the decimal. 1 place value for the 2 and 1 place value for the 3. Let's try another one. If you were to multiply 25 hundredths times 3/10, you could multiply 25 times 3, which equals 75. But we know that 25 hundredths times 3/10 won't equal 75 wholes, so now we need to place our decimal. To place our decimal, we're going to count how many place values over we need to move. We have 1, 2, 3. So now I'm going to move my decimal over 1, 2, 3 places. And since I have a blank spot here, I'm going to fill it in with a 0 as a placeholder. So now I know that 25 hundredths times 3 tenths is equal to 75 thousandths. Let's try a practice problem together. I have an area model already completed on the screen for you. I want you to write the equation to match the model. Well, let's see. We have 2 columns of tenths highlighted in red. So that means we are going to be multiplying 2 tenths. But what are we going to multiply it by? Let's count how many rows of tenths are highlighted in blue. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths. So we're multiplying 2 tenths times 4 tenths. Let's see how many hundredths we have that are double shaded in. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 hundredths. So that means that 2 tenths times 4 tenths is equal to 8 hundredths. Let's try one more practice problem together. I want you to multiply 32 hundredths times 2 tenths. All right, remember, when we're multiplying not using an area model, we're going to multiply our two numbers together, 32 times 2, which equals 64. Then to place the decimal, we need to count how many place values over our decimal is. So we have 1, 2, 3. So now we count over 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3. And since I have a blank space here, I need to make sure that I put in my placeholder to represent 64 thousandths. Let's take a moment to review what you've learned in today's lesson. When you're multiplying decimals, you need to remember that you're multiplying a part by a part. You're not going to be multiplying the whole number. So when you're multiplying tenths by tenths, you can use an area model. Now we have 5 tenths that are already highlighted in green. To multiply 5 tenths by 3 tenths, we need to highlight 3 rows of tenths. And the boxes that are double highlighted, which are your hundredths, are going to be your answer. So 5 tenths times 3 tenths is equal to 15 hundredths because we have 15 hundredths boxes shaded in. Now, if you're not going to be using the area model, you can still multiply your numbers together. Just remember to move your decimal. 5 times 3 equals 15. Now our decimal needs to move over 1, 2 place values. So we move over 1, 2 place values to show 15 hundredths.